Hi all, we didn't get to finish the practice problems 27s from 11.8 in class. I think I ran out of time with number 2, so I want to go through and make sure we've got all the details on that one. So the first thing that I'm going to do is keep in mind that when I have a power series, I want to know what that power series is centered at. So I'm looking for something where it says x minus a to the n. And I don't have that because I have that 3 in front. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rearrange this a little bit. So sum n equals, and really this should be 0 to infinity. And I'm going to put the 1 over n in the front, and I'm going to put the rest of it all together. So 3x minus 2 all over 3, everybody to the n. And I can do that because both of those two things had n powers on them. And then I'm going to go ahead and divide that through. So 3x over 3 is just going to be x, and 2 over 3 is 2/3. And now what I have, and I can write this back, where this is x minus 2/3 to the n all over n. So now I have a power series that's centered at 2/3, and I can determine its radius and interval of convergence. So that means the next step is to go ahead and use the ratio test. So that means I'm going to have the limit as n goes to infinity. And I'm going to go ahead and flip these right away. So I'm going to have x minus 2/3 to the n plus 1 all over n plus 1 times the reciprocal of the original. So n over x minus 2/3 to the n. Okay, so next we want the limit as n goes to infinity. And I want to pull apart my n plus 1s if I can. The n plus 1 on the bottom, I can't. I just leave it as n plus 1. And I'm going to make this x minus 2/3, pull the 1 away, and x minus 2/3 to the n. And we're multiplying that by n over x minus 2/3 to the n. And now I can cancel the x minus 2/3 to the n. So if I think about grouping this with terms that are similar, this is, I'm going to put the n over the n plus 1, because those are similar, and then I've got times the x minus 2/3. And if I take the limit of that fraction, n over n plus 1, those have the same power, so that's going to give me 1. So this is just the absolute value of x minus 2/3. And if I wanted to converge using ratio test, I want this to be less than 1. So right away, that tells me that my r is equal to 1. And to create my interval, I want to take the x minus 2/3, and I want to make it less than 1 and greater than negative 1. And then I'm going to add the 2/3 to each of the 3 pieces. So if I add 2/3, my middle becomes just x. This one will become 5/3. And this one will become negative 1/3. Okay, so then what we need to do is we need to check these two endpoints. So let me go all the way over here and say, okay, what if x is negative 1/3? If x is negative 1/3, then I'm plugging that x in to here. So that's going to be sum n equals 0 to infinity of 3 times negative 1/3 minus 2 to the n all over n 3 to the n. And what happens to that? So this becomes n equals 0 to infinity. Let's see, the 3's will cancel and I'll get negative 1 minus 2 is negative 3 to the n. So I'm going to have negative 3 to the n over n times 3 to the n. And that's just going to be negative 1 to the n. Negative 3 over 3 is negative 1 over n. And this one actually converges because it's the alternating harmonic. So if you check the alternating series test, you look at 1 over n, the limit goes to 0, so you get that. And 1 over n is also decreasing, so it converges. Okay, but we've shown that a couple of times. So that one we're actually going to add to our interval. And then for x equals 5/3, we're going to do exactly the same thing. So we're going to have sum n equals 0 to infinity, 3 times 5/3 minus 2 to the n over n 3 to the n. If we take a look, let's see what happens to this one. When you cancel the 3's, you have 5 minus 2, which is positive 3 to the n, over n 3 to the n. You can cancel your 3 to the n's, and you're left with the sum n equals 0 to infinity of 1 over n, which is harmonic, which we know diverges. So we're going to include the negative 1/3, but exclude the 5/3. So my r is equal to 1. And my interval is going to be, we're including the negative 1/3, but we're not including the 5/3. So it will look something like that. So again, kind of 3 problems in one.